everyone. Welcome to Zannen, Canada. I'm your host, Jesse Betteridge. This is a podcast exploring the connections between anime and Canadian media. And today we're looking at a movie that intersects between those two things. It's based on a manga. And even though it has no key creatives behind it who were actually Canadian, at least none who were credited, and it never got a proper theatrical release here, and it wasn't available in the US at all until recently. And it's still not available in Canada in any form whatsoever. But the important thing is that this movie is based on a manga by Kazuo Koike and Ryuichi Ikigami. And it has a scene where an explosion takes place in front of the old downtown Eaton's in Vancouver. So we have to talk about it. It is the 1995 Crying Freeman movie. And joining me to discuss this great film, I'd like to welcome back to the show from the Anime World Order podcast, Daryl Surratt. Daryl, thanks for coming back on.
Great to be back on, Jesse. It's been a while, but just as a quick correction, I believe this movie is not available legally in the United States in any way, shape, or form to this day. I mean, there was a brief period where it was streaming, and I think even that window is closed. It's never been released on any home media. It never came out in the theaters. It would occasionally play on cable, pay cable.
Oh, it was on cable, so that's a greater availability than I thought up until...
Yeah, back in the days when there was Cinemax and Showtime and stuff like that, I think it would occasionally show there, because I think that's how I first saw it. Yeah, you can't get the Blu-ray. You can't get the 1080p streaming. They can't get that 3-disc set. All that stuff is import only.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and there's no Canadian release. I thought King Charles was finally going to fix stuff like that when he took the throne, but we're still waiting on that. So it's not available despite having Canadian funding. Also joining us today from the Anime World Order podcast, I'd like to welcome onto the show for the first time, Gerald Rathkolb. Gerald, hey. Thanks for coming on.
My first time here. Thanks for having me.
I know you have a certain passion for anime manga adaptations featuring Mark Dacascos. At least in this one, unlike the Saint Seiya movie, which you guys talked about on your show recently.
Well, he was certainly the best part of the Saint Seiya movie, which is not exactly saying a whole lot. But yeah, this is quite a thing. I'm glad we're talking about it. There's certainly a lot to say about Crying Freeman. It's interesting because this came out 1 year after the anime had just ended. Yeah, the anime was
anime OVA
project.
Yeah, and the anime OVA started right after the manga ended as well. So you have that kind of progression there. The sense of Crying Freeman moving on to greater things, whether that's really accurate is maybe questionable. But actually, the first thing I wanted to talk about was how everyone first kind of discovered this movie, your background with it is, or with Crying Freeman in general. Daryl, you kind of already started on that. So you said you originally saw this movie through cable, like I assume HBO or wherever it was playing at the time.
I think that's accurate.
Yeah.
I mean, again, they're talking about a film from about 30 years ago, nearly, and so everything kind of bleeds together after a point. But certainly Crying Freeman was something that, at the time, being a fan of anime in the 1990s, people would generally be in some way aware of it, because let's say if you rented a Streamline Pictures tape, in their trailer, they'd always have shots of Crying Freeman, what they could show at least, on a general trailer of it. Mm-hmm. And typically if you'd go to a video store and they had Crying Freeman, you had to present ID to be able to rent it. Oddly enough, you would generally not have to present ID to rent movies like live action films. I think they were just really scared about people getting the wrong cartoons. And so I either rented it from a video store, or more likely, my recollection was I saw it on cable. Crying Freeman as a comic book was obviously a sort of popular, infamous thing at the same time, because Viz was releasing that in English in the United States. They were doing it in the traditional American comic book style, where rather than the modern way we know about reading manga in the collected volumes, you'd get it one floppy issue at a time, that full-size page sort of stuff. I never read Crying Freeman that way. I would wait for it to come out in the trades, and what they would do was they didn't want, say, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, because they didn't want people to not just pick up a book. They'd give each story a title of its own, like a little subtitle, like Portrait of a Killer or something to that effect.
They wanted people to be able, or people in the normal comic graphic novel market to be able to jump in with any particular book. Yeah.
Which doesn't work for this because
no, it doesn't.
It's a little iffy logic, but when does that ever stop them? The thing about the 90s, though, was that Ryoichi Ikegami's artwork was particularly conducive to this sort of Western appeal because his art style is very almost hyper-realistic, I would say. It's not really...
It's like Otomo. It's very Otomo-like as well. Like, it doesn't... there's no, like, stereotype... Like, I really hate when people say, like, the anime look or the manga look because there isn't
like how
one.
to draw a manga style. Like, that doesn't exist, but people associate the Jump Shueisha in-house sort of stylistic similarities as being what all anime manga look like. And Ikegami has always sort of been the poster child of, look, things can look very different because Ikegami has this very, like, strong adherence to, like, anatomy and physiology and also, like, very photorealistic, like, referenced oftentimes backgrounds, a lot of detail, and so people would look to his work, like, say, Crying Freeman or Sanctuary or Mai the Psychic Girl, and say, you know what, this can transcend to reach Western audiences, and to the point of what we're talking about here, this can readily be imagined as something occurring in live action because the art style is so grounded in realism.
He's very influenced by, I guess, what you'd call the old Gekiga style, which is what they called adult manga before, back when there was some kind of meaningful distinction. Seinen magazines always have a title or two that sort of call back to that, even though a lot of it is, it's not representative of that, yeah.
Ikegami style is very sort of standard, like, seinen style.
Yeah.
It's
seinen is a very, probably the
very
widest.
Broad.
It's very broad, especially now.
Like, I would say a very standard, like, business jump style maybe might be more accurate because
unfortunately a business jump no longer exists, but I understand it was a publication that, like, was the stereotypical embodiment of the salarymen reading comics on the train where there's a lot of sex and violence and stuff like that. Although Business Jump was more on the violence side.
Salaryman power fantasy stories.
Also, the thing with Crying Freeman, and I saw, like, my history with Crying Freeman is I believe I rented the first tape a long time ago. And the thing with Crying Freeman is if you take that first, that for those first, like, story or two, or the first volume, or this movie completely by itself, no other part of Crying Freeman, like, it seems like a very adult thriller.
Yeah.
This is it's a very, like, something like, I don't know, Basic Instinct or some sort of very, like, thriller sort of thing that you would see adults enjoying in movies in the 80s and 90s. Anywhere outside of that, like, if you go further into the manga, it gets into utter insanity. And also with Ryoichi Ikegami's work and Kazuo Koike's work, this is the one that is the most respectable for the longest time.
It holds itself together just long enough to sort of play out its initial premise.
You didn't think Sanctuary was respectable, Gerald?
Well, Sanctuary was not going to translate well to, this story about the Yakuza and stuff. I don't think was going to translate as well. Not without Sean Connery there to tell them how to do it right.
Well, this is what I wanted to say about Ikegami's style. It has this very sort of hard-boiled, almost kind of distinguished look to it, but the stories that he's usually drawing, and they're almost always written. No, they're always written by other people, but they're usually just like batshit insane or goofy as shit or something like that.
Yeah, I recommend if you can track down his Spider-Man manga.
Yeah, that's one of his earliest work was the Spider-Man manga
because
from the 70s. Yeah.
And the thing is when I saw this, and you see, like, Kazuo Koike wrote this, and Ryoichi Ikegami did this, and then you put together, like, as you get older, like, he also Koike also did like Lone Wolf and Cub. You think of Koike initially as some sort of very distinguished writer of very highbrow entertainment, and then you realize, oh, no, those are just the things we got here because those were the exceptions, because those were the acceptable ones. The things like Offered and God's pornographic films and
that's Wounded Man, Gerald. It's not God's pornographic X-rated films. It's the
look,
title.
That is the title that it is in my mind. No, Wounded Man and Offered, and the insanity that those like delve into.
Well, you remember, Gerald, Koike and Ikegami worked together since the 70s.
Yes.
Not just on things like AEIOU Boy, but they also did the Incredible Hulk manga. So imagine Kazuo Koike writing the Hulk.
Oh, I haven't heard of this one. I've
not seen that one.
Yeah.
I have seen some of the Spider-Man manga. Yeah, and I mean, even this, they like while this movie is actually like very accurate to the original work, they still, backed off quite a bit. Like, I'm sure, like, Christoph Gans was like, okay, I don't think we can have, like, the boxing ring blowjob scene where the entire, like, crew is jacking off while watching them.
But that didn't happen in this first volume.
No, that's what I mean, is that,
I mean, they could have worked it in somehow. They could have worked in elements from those later arcs into this movie had they so chosen. There was a little extra time.
Yeah, remember, this is the directorial debut of Christoph Gans.
Well, the theatrical directorial.
Yeah, I guess he'd done like a short film or something.
Short film. He did some direct-to-video stuff before this.
Nowadays, Christoph Gans is best known for his adaptations of Silent Hill, which are generally kind of not very well regarded as being particularly faithful to the source material because, people want to see that pyramid head or whatever.
Gerald, just back to your own experience. For this film specifically, I'm just curious, when did you first see it? Did you actually catch it on TV or video, or did you have to pirate
it? I absolutely saw this on TV.
Okay.
Sometime in the 90s. This feels like I would have seen this like Cinemax or something. Like this feels like something that would have been like 10 p.m. on Cinemax. Not like the midnight Cinemax movie, which is what we all waited for. But this feels like something I would have seen around then, because I know that's sort of when I saw the Fist of the North Star movie, as well, in similar vein. Yeah,
because I know that the narrative with the Crying Freeman movie is that it's just something that was just completely unavailable in North America until the very brief streaming window came up. On Amazon Prime a little while back, but it seems that that's not so much the case. I think it may have gotten like a small art house run in Canada. I actually wasn't able to confirm that. I imagine if the film got Canadian funding, it probably played in at least one theater here. But it sounds like it actually, emerged on higher tier cable stations the same way that things like the Fist of the North Star movie did, and a lot of comparable things in the mid '90s did in the States.
This feels kind of like one of the very, very like made in English but released in Europe sort of movies.
Well, it is a co-production between Japan and I believe also Canada, obviously, if you can't tell, possibly also France. It's not considered an American film by any stretch of the imagination. It's
there's no American money.
Hollywood sensibility.
They were not able to get a Canadian, they were not able to get an American distributor involved in the film. They were trying to, and that's why a big reason why the budget was so low and was cut while they were producing it. But they couldn't get any involvement from an American distributor. Pretty much the only American involvement was some of the actors, or most of the actors, actually.
Yeah, I would say most of the actors of note are not Canadian. Some of them are super Canadian. And, they did workarounds for that. But because of the co-production nature of it, there are a lot of Asian and, specifically Japanese actors in the picture, some of whom, seems like they don't really speak English particularly well. This is another sort of similarity that the Fist of the North Star movie had, where they, as part of the terms and conditions, like, you have to cast this actress. And it's like, but she doesn't really speak English. So she'll do her lines phonetically. Or that sort of stuff. In this case, at least two of the actors had to be dubbed over entirely in their dialogue.
And I didn't know that or realize it when I watched the film the first time. But when I learned that and then watched it prepare for this podcast, it really sticks out. It sticks out when you know. But yeah, I personally with this movie, I have never saw it through any legal channel. I imagine it was probably running on Super Channel or some cable tier here at some point. But I've only seen it through piracy. There's no Blu-ray here. You have to import it from, I think, France and Germany are the only ones who have had a proper home video release. And if you import it here, you have to have a region-free Blu-ray player in order to watch it, as we all should have.
Which is weird, because you would think this would be a movie that certainly in 1995 would have, appeal to be like. This seems like something that would have done reasonably well in theaters.
Well, I think in VHS there's a possibility that it may have been rented out, because I do know when I would go to, say, a Hong Kong supermarket and they would hand Hong Kong tapes for rent, they actually had the Hong Kong live-action Crying Freeman that was made several years prior to this one.
Yeah.
It wasn't called Crying Freeman. It was called something like Dragon from Russia or something like that. But still the same plot. They just changed the names up, just very common practice back then. And they may have actually had, this English language Crying Freeman there alongside it.
Yeah, this really seems like something. In fact, I think I may have seen a little bit of this in my early anime community days, where people would talk about this movie, about how good it was, and they would do so knowing that you can't see it easily. This is like...
Oh, we call that the
Zeta Gundam effect.
Yeah, we call that the Zeta Gundam movie.
Yeah.
So, call it the most amazing thing you've ever seen in your life, and you can't see it.
Well, I don't know where everyone stands on Zeta Gundam. I think it certainly did not live up to the years and years of hype. Crying Freeman, I think, holds up pretty well, and that's actually what I wanted to know. Where do you guys stand on just the general quality of this movie?
We just did a panel, actually, all about the various Western live-action adaptations of anime, and we held up Crying Freeman as an example of one of the better ones.
Yeah, I think that this is not even taken in isolation, like even taken with its original material, I think this movie is pretty darn good.
Yeah, shockingly faithful to the source material. A lot of respect was kept for retaining, here's what happened on the page, and now let's actually realize that. And that was not like an unknown thing. If you were like reading reviews, they would say, because you watch this movie, it's very bold and upfront in the credits, this is adapted from a comic book.
Yeah, and I mean, Christoph Gans is you can say whatever you want about some of his movies, but he's got a great eye for production design. And I think he's got obviously, he was working on a very, very slim budget on this movie. Certainly did his best to make Vancouver, double for A, Vancouver, and B, like Shanghai.
And Japan
and,
also.
And Hokkaido.
I think they have to go out to like other
and
parts
San
of British
Francisco
Columbia.
and New York.
Yeah.
Vancouver always doubles for New York City anyway, and countless other productions. But yeah, this whole thing is filmed in British Columbia, and it's supposedly like this globe-trotting affair.
Yeah.
And openly, yes, it is one of the very few movies openly set in Vancouver, which is funny because one of my favorite YouTube channels, which no longer posts anymore, Every Frame a Painting. The guy there is from Vancouver, and one of his videos was Vancouver, never is Vancouver.
Yeah, I know.
Well, that is a change from the original source material to have it take place largely in Vancouver. Like if you read the source material, which is readily available now, Dark Horse Comics has kept Crying Freeman in print, and it's still in print, both in print and as well as digital.
Yeah, the digital is quite cheap too, so you can pick
very
I think you can
affordable.
pick volume up for just a few dollars. Yeah,
but
China
in that
and Japan,
comic, it mostly takes place within Japan and within China. But in the case of this one, they have that initial portion of it just explicitly. We're just going to say it's Vancouver.
Yep.
Yeah, and
how much of a Yakuza presence is in Vancouver, Jesse?
I think more than people would expect, but less than this movie implies. I think that's what I'm kind of thinking there.
Yeah, like the notion of there's like tens of thousands of Yakuza soldiers ready to go to war, here in Vancouver is sort of a bit of a stretch. When you realize that, okay, in the original it was, Tokyo, then it's like, okay, maybe it makes a little more sense from a fantasy standpoint.
Yeah. The fact that Vancouver actually plays Vancouver in this movie is something that I particularly love about it. Even though it makes some weird decisions, like the Vancouver City Hall that they present near the beginning of the film. It is not Vancouver City Hall. It's the Vancouver Art Gallery playing Vancouver City Hall. So it's still not... You still have that effect of landmarks being used for things that they're not, even though we know
Are they
them.
just going all over the city from shot to shot like Gerald points out in Weekend
No, they're
at Bernie's
not.
too?
It is quite centered in downtown Vancouver for that early set piece.
So it's kind of like Michael Bay Bad Boys 2, where it's like it's set in Miami and it's blocked out to be like this is actually like traveling to place in Miami.
Yeah, no. Even though they make that one change, it's quite geographically accurate. Like if you're from Vancouver, you'll see that. You'll know where they're going. You'll know where the sniper action is coming from, where they're shooting down to. It's pretty accurate. I was reading that they moved production to Vancouver for this movie, thinking that it was going to be cheaper, and it turned out that it didn't actually save them very much money.
Moved it to Vancouver from where?
Or, sorry, not moved it. They decided to shoot in Vancouver because they thought it would be inexpensive. And they probably did save money doing that, and obviously featuring Vancouver and saying it's Vancouver would qualify them for certain tax credits, perhaps
also,
more so than before. But I think that in doing so, even though they didn't get the benefits that they hoped for, it really feels like they... leaned in. I think they just found shooting in Vancouver to be very novel, and they really leaned into that, which is maybe why it was handled the way that it was in this movie. That's my guess. That's the impression I get.
I think reading the work that they had these, if they wanted to have outside shots in Tokyo, like I'm sure Vancouver obviously doubles for a lot of places around the world. Mm-hmm. Maybe it wouldn't be as convincing at Tokyo.
No, I mean there's the Yakuza funeral scene, and just looking at that, it's just like, oh, they couldn't even they're driving on the left side of the car, and you can just it falls apart pretty quickly when you're looking for it. I don't think you could pull Vancouver off as Tokyo very well.
Most of the places that are set in quote unquote like Shanghai and Japan in this movie are all either indoors or they are in like a forest. I guess there's like a Buddhist temple somewhere in Vancouver where they shot this.
They built that temple specifically for this movie. I don't think they were even that far out of the city when they did it, but it's supposed to be in Hokkaido. You'd think that they would have at least gotten like the overhead helicopter shot. They would have gotten Hokkaido for that, but it's not. It is like very clearly British Columbia when you see all those trees. It's like, yeah. I laughed when the screen says Hokkaido. It's like, no, that's not Hokkaido.
So it's kind of like when I watch Weekend at Bernie's and then they're in like the forest and I'm like, okay, if you turn the camera right around, there's a highway right behind them.
Yeah.
So,
but yeah,
it was very it was very efficient filmmaking, I thought, for a movie like this.
It was, and you appreciate that as you're watching it, because you don't get the impression, like this movie, I think it was like budgeted at something like 12 to 15 million, and they wound up doing it for
I would say
just a little more than the Room cost, like under 10 million.
Well, remember The Room, he bought all of that equipment.
Yeah.
That movie should have cost like $2 million.
I'm not saying that's what The Room should have cost, but
well, in this case, it certainly at least feels like a mid-budget action film of the time, which used to be fairly commonplace. You know, there's some decent makeup effects in here. There's some good, some blood work, explosions.
Some really good explosions, I thought.
I think, it doesn't look like a ultra cheap, like zero budget film. I think just nowadays in 2023, it's just such a gap. Like you either have movies that cost $300 million, a third of $1 billion to make, or things that are made on like the absolute basis, like shoestring.
Yeah.
And when it comes to action, you need a little more to do at least a decent, action film that's not just pure martial arts or what have you. And so this was a film of that era where you could do that.
Yeah. I miss those movies a lot.
I know, like the mid-budget film is just it's gone, and this type of movie is what used to occupy that space. So it's really going back and watching it now. It's like you really get a sense of something that we've lost. And also, Crying Freeman, it also has like a little bit of an art house sheen to it. That kind of
This was kind of cutting edge in
yeah.
some ways, because remember, in 1995, people were still like starting to tape trade these Hong Kong action movies. It's like, hey, have you heard about this guy John Woo, and stuff like that. There's a lot of like stylistic flares in this that were not common in the Hollywood action pictures of the era. Though there are certainly times, especially at the end, where it just almost feels like it turns into like straight up Mark Lester Commando style, just like standing out in the middle of the open, firing a gun, things exploding, people doing front flips, that kind of action. So you kind of get all of it in here.
Yeah, we were talking a bit about the director Christoph Gans, and he would go on to direct the Silent Hill movie, and he is apparently doing the new Silent Hill movie that's coming out in the next couple of years.
I would
Did
say,
they not see the old one?
Yeah, like that's just it. I would say the movies of Christoph Gans that were the best was this one, Crying Freeman, and then the one he made afterwards, Brotherhood of the Wolf.
And
I think might be his best one overall. Also Mark Dacascos, because, he liked working with him here. And I think that one is like came out right at that time where like it was this confluence of like anime is cool and Hong Kong martial arts action is cool and just monsters and just like a bunch of stuff like that. And he put all that together well, and that's probably how he got the job for Silent Hill. But yeah, I mean, it's not.
I appreciate that they made some interesting changes in it. For example, and I'm not a gun person. I don't have a flippin' clue about guns. But the gun that Crying Freeman originally had was a very small or sort of efficient revolver, and just kind of designed to do the job. Obviously, they thought about that, and that wasn't good enough for this movie. They gave him like a hand cannon in this. Like,
yeah,
obviously, that's the other
obviously
thing
designed
that's like the John
this
Woo
is
style, right?
Yeah, way over the top for killing someone. That's what you use for taking out a car. Or like a helicopter.
Also like one bullet just doesn't cut it in this style of film. Like in that Heroic Bloodshed era, it's like guys got to get shot like 20 times. And a .38 revolver, a little harder for people to suspend the disbelief of, you got to shoot like 20 people, with this gun.
Yeah. So certainly the Hong Kong movie influence from that, which again works for what they were doing with this. I think that it is unfortunate that we can't get this movie easily.
Yeah. And going back to Brotherhood of the Wolf, that is available now. It was reissued recently. In fact, there's a 4K Blu-ray out for that right now. And I remember when that movie came out, I think it may have been, it came out around the same time as Amélie, and I think those two movies are maybe the highest profile French language movies I can remember in my lifetime. It was a really big deal, and people were really talking about that.
It was novel that they'd release foreign language subtitled films at the time. Like they said, okay, we can get away with that for things like Hero and things like,
Iron Monkey. I saw.
Yeah,
obviously, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was the one that really opened the gates to people being receptive to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Weinsteins, like, we got it in Chinese, but we also got like 30 minutes cut from it.
Yeah. And I know when Brotherhood of the Wolf came out, people, you heard a bit about the director. He's like this, fantastic guy for cinematography. He knows how to make a, visually stunning movie. Just with all this French sensibility and stuff. And when Silent Hill came out, they would talk about the director as this weird French guy who was obsessed with video games. I don't think a lot of people realize that they were in fact the same director at that time. But unfortunately, it's too bad that he has not made very many movies since. He gives such a great visual flair to everything that he does, but I guess he just got put into movie jail after Silent Hill.
I was actually looking to see like what he did. I guess he made like a French Beauty and the Beast movie in 2014, but that's 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And I don't know what he's done since then. And you can't go 8 years without working, but he's got like some things coming up. So yeah, it's like he's doing more Silent Hill, but that last one people did not like that movie. So I don't know how he's doing another one.
Well, in any case, I think we should probably talk about what this film is got going for it, what it's about.
Yeah. I mean, I guess we haven't really summarized what Crying Freeman. Well, I guess there's what Crying Freeman, what the initial premise is, and then what the comic becomes after that initial premise kind of.
I would say all this.
Out.
The initial premise is generally all that ever gets adapted into most other media. Obviously, the anime did adapt the rest of it, but again, they toned it way back. I think
way back.
To like what this movie is about, and that's like the closest of like, here's your story, here's the beginning, middle, and here's the end.
It's essentially, it's like a take on the Manchurian Candidate. A Potter is sees something that he shouldn't, or finds out something that he shouldn't, and he finds himself abducted by the Chinese triad. In the comic, it's the 108 dragons. In the movie, it's changed to the Sons of the Dragons, and he just becomes their hitman, who is use hypnotic suggestion to basically carry out murders. And when he carries out the murders, he still has the emotion and regret and emerges as a tear that he sheds. And he carries out a murder in the film at San Francisco. In the original, I think it was all in Tokyo in the original.
It was all
comic.
Japan.
All
Japan,
yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful irony because it's called Crying Freeman, but he is anything but free.
he desires his freedom, and so they give him that code name in the comics. But yeah, in this one, it's just like, okay, yeah, you're the Freeman. That's your code name. We just call everybody who we do this to the Freeman.
Yeah, but
yeah, like they abduct him. They magically like hypnotize him into being a great killer. They tattoo a full body dragon on him to say that he's one of their group, and then I guess he just makes for the perfect assassin because he's able to do these things and also be irresistible to women, which is never explicitly brought up in this film, but you can just see it as he's just doing mundane things like checking into customs. But in reality, that's just Mark Dacascos in regular everyday life. I don't think there was really that part of the script. I think everyone was just so enamored by Mark Dacascos that it ended up just working out that way. Like, it turns out that the lady who was the lead in this, he ended up marrying her.
She divorced her husband right after filming this movie, and then married Mark Dacascos 4 years later.
Yeah,
well,
so that's the power of the Freeman.
Yeah.
So look, we had talks about this, but Mark Dacascos.
Speculation.
Yes, that. But Mark Dacascos is definitely a piece in this. Holy crap, he is gorgeous.
If you're looking like Mark Dacascos, you make sure to get like these full body shots of my butt and my body, because here's what I got, ladies. Come get it.
Well, yeah, there was the speculation. We had a deep question about the movie, which was whether Mark Dacascos banged every woman on set while he forced the husbands to watch, and the director, or just the husbands. And we've been going back and forth on that. It's been a deep question.
I'm sure Christoph Gans would have been into it.
Yeah, it's one of those things, like, there are some changes from the original. Most of the major changes are they don't have a fully Asian cast.
No. And
so they change some of the last names to be not Asian last names, but generally they're still playing the same character. And in addition, and I have no idea why this is the case, but Rae Dong Chong, Tommy Chong's daughter, as famously seen in the movie Commando, she's in this movie for seemingly no reason.
She is Canadian. So I think, and she mainly serves to sort of pad out the first act, and just give Detective Nata, who's in this version is an Interpol cop, someone to bounce off of.
Do you think it was maybe like a tax credit thing to have like certain number of Canadian?
Have some number of Canadian speaking rules or something.
Yeah, like I mentioned, they don't. Almost basically none of the key creatives or lead actors in this film are Canadian, except Rae Dong Chong. She is Canadian and just has a fairly small role in the beginning part of the movie. And the woman who we mentioned dubbing over actors and actresses in this film. So Julie Condra, who plays Emu O'Hara, who was one of the characters.
Or Emu Hino in the original source material.
She was She is a race bent character. Obviously, this was a non-issue at the time. Despite the fact that she looks strikingly similar to the character in the manga as well.
Sure, like Ikigami's artwork is one of those things that people will look at and be like, why do people look this way? It's like, look, he just draws. All right, get over it.
Well,
she looks very similar to the artwork as drawn on the page.
That was a point I wanted to make, actually. They look so similar, like the two leads, to the characters in the comic. It's dangerously close to looking like some kind of cosplay skit. But Gans and the rest of the team, they have such a keen eye for making things look good on film that it just kind of avoids that, and again just looks like more of it just adds to that, again, art house sheen to it. And I think it kind of shows that there's a very fine line between a bad cosplay thing and something that looks very, very art house like. That I think not a lot of people can navigate or make work.
And also has to do with the source material itself. Like, I think if there's a certain amount of abstraction in the original comic, attempting to mirror that in reality can either have, it can backfire or it can go well for you. And in the case of Ikigami, like, there's so little, like, that you need to really change up. Like, it's not like you don't really have to make, like, a big fantasy world set. You can just go to Vancouver or whatever.
And what I was getting at, Julie Condra, who plays Emu, first name not changed. It's very strange for a Canadian woman to have the first name Emu. She's the one who sees the Freeman kill a guy, and then then herself is going to get murdered. Then he doesn't murder her, and that's sort of what kicks off the plot of this first arc. But her voice is dubbed over in this. The reasoning apparently was that she is not. It wasn't a deep, sexy voice.
Her voice wasn't erotic enough.
Yeah, it wasn't erotic enough. But the woman who dubbed over her voice, who I forgot to write down, and I'm not sure it was even credited, but she was a Canadian actress. So that may have also fed into just trying to get those tax credits and funding.
Yeah, local British Columbia actress.
Yeah,
because I know that's the case in like Australia. Is if you want those credits there, you have to hire X number of Australian talent, which I understand then. And so that's why I thought maybe some of those people were there. I also had no idea Ron Perlman had like a very small role in this movie.
It's not a small role. I mean, he's playing the role of the lead, antagonist, as a matter of course, just the cop.
Cheiki Cario plays the cop, the Interpol detective, but he is dubbed over. He's
because I guess that guy is super Quebecian or whatever.
No, he's a French actor, and he's been
French. Okay,
he's been in lots of. He's from France, and he's in like La Femme Nikita and a bunch of other things. But he has quite a French accent, and they didn't want that, so they had Ron Perlman, who is not Canadian, dub over him. So a strange decision, I think, and when you know that he's been dubbed over, it's quite distracting.
I just remember being distracted when I saw him in this movie that spiritually killed me, and I've been dead inside ever since. I'm talking, of course, of the live-action Wing Commander film, where he was playing the role of a guy who was supposed to be Scottish in the source material, and they did not dub him over. So he just became like this swarthy Frenchman instead. But yeah, he's just he's been constantly working. He's a character actor. He's just in all sorts of TV shows and films and whatever, as some sort of usually shady guy.
I mean, going on with the other few Canadian names, when you look at the writers for the film, some additional dialogue is credited to Laurie Finstad Kisnick. She, as far as I can tell, she's just sort of a producer, and I think that her actual contributions were probably limited, and again was probably just a way to get that funding secured. But interestingly, one of the other writers who made contributions and apparently did dialogue rewrites was Roger Avery, who I think
very important person.
Very important person, not only for being the co-writer of the Pulp Fiction script, but he also recently declared on Twitter that the Konosuba movie was quite possibly the reason that cinema was invented. And he also worked with Gans on he wrote the script for the Silent Hill movie as well. And interestingly, it looks like he was quite involved with the script here, but he is not credited, which is weird because he is Canadian. So I thought that would have been also a way to sort of just get another Canadian name in the credits. But
yeah, he's generally associated with Tarantino as like a kind of guy who sort of bounces ideas off of him.
Yeah.
I think they have a show. I think they have like some little thing that they do together. I just don't remember the details. But yeah, Roger Avery, somewhat infamous.
Noted Konosuba fan.
Yeah.
yes.
And even though I know he went to the movie because he loves his daughter, and they went to watch it together, which is adorable. But still, I just want to believe that he was there for Konosuba. But yeah, that was pretty neat. And I mean, the name that stuck out to me, who I recognized, was of course Mako.
Yeah, he plays the Yakuza boss, or the father. He speaks just enough that you'll know it's him. Mako's, of course, the late voice of Aku from Samurai Jack and Uncle Iroh from Avatar. I think that's
Also Master
Conan the
Splinter,
Barbarian.
and generally speaking, almost all of Mako's voice roles that we just talked about, he was in Ailing Health, and Phil Lamar had to actually do that voice for most of those roles we just discussed.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's certainly in the movie. I was always getting a kick out of Masaya Kato, who is playing the rival Yakuza, who in this movie, like, they kill him by, like, they blow him up. But he was in this.
he's hamming it up quite a bit in this movie,
so
which
he
I found delightful.
Awesome movie that I like. Also with Mark Dacascos, they made right after Crying Freeman, called Drive, and I adore that movie to death.
Is great.
And
not
it's
not the recent one. Yes.
No, not the Ryan Gosling one.
No,
I'm
this
talking about
is
the
a
one
very
that,
different Drive.
Yeah, Steve Wang, Koichi Sakamoto, and the uncut version is finally out there. But yeah, he was in a lot of things around this time in the 90s. He's still around actually, but yeah, I got a kick out of him being in it. And then I think the lady they got to be like the boss Yakuza lady at the end, she was in like the James Clavell Shogun thing from the 80s.
Yoko Shimada. She actually passed away just last year. But I thought she was great in this movie. She has a very strong presence.
The only, I guess, for a Kazuo Koike movie, I guess she was the only one who was willing to get naked.
To be frontally naked for the film.
Because
as ridiculous as that whole scene was, that's exactly what happens in the comics, right down to hearing the gunshot, and then in the middle of coitus, she draws a revolver or whatever.
Right, because the original like sex scene between Yo and the painter lady was much longer and much more explicit.
Yeah, certainly, and a lot of the elements of like, oh, neither of us have had sex before, except, in Freeman's background, he's like, getting filleted as part of his training.
Yeah,
that don't count.
Yeah, they downplay that part of it. I know with Emu's character in this, they lean into her guilt over her parents getting killed, which I don't think was a thing in the manga at all. And they just sort of try to lean on that rather than the fact that she knows she's going to die and will die a virgin.
The stigma of being the 30-year-old virgin lady. Yeah. Well, please, before you kill me, can you give it to me so I can die a woman? Like, that's not in this film. The way it's in the comic. That's a wise decision, maybe. That's
Yeah, they cut back a lot on some of the very like lurid elements in this movie, or at least they filmed a little bit more tastefully, because even in the first volume, there is, the blowjob while he's getting the tattoos and the many other lurid details that either they didn't want to film, or, you have to pay a lot of money to an actress to, get naked. So
in terms of the other actors in the film, I think the one we haven't touched on is Byron Mann, who plays Freeman's keeper. With Ko, I think was the name. I can't remember the character's name. I didn't.
Ko, yes.
Ko, yeah.
Yeah, that's another changed name from the original, and they sort of changed up what he ended up doing in this. But, basically he's his friend, he's his handler in this film.
Yeah, and Byron Mann was very young when he did this role. I don't think was he even 25? He looks young in this. I don't know if he quite sold the part for me personally. But,
of being like a wizened assassin.
Yeah.
Considering the year before he played Ryu in Street Fighter. That's
the really bad one, the Van
Yeah.
Damme Street Fighter.
The Van Damme, yes.
Remember, it's pronounced Ryu in that movie.
Like Ryu in this movie. So, Byron Mann. But yes, I mean, I thought it was okay in this. Like, I guess he did the job, but there's a lot of people in this movie, so it's quite a casting thing. Yeah,
I've seen some people criticizing the cast of the film. I didn't really have any serious problems with it. I thought everyone was, if not good, serviceable for sure. It's pretty well balanced in that area overall. I think one thing I wanted to highlight just about the background of the film. I think. Talk about the producer, Brian Yuzna.
I mean, he is the architect of a lot of these live action anime things.
Exactly.
He was the producer of the Guyver, like the one where there was the rapping in the Guyver. That's Brian Yuzna.
Yeah, I mean, he has a background in direct-to-video horror schlock, which that's where
Reanimator,
he worked.
right?
Yeah,
that was him.
Well, Reanimator was actually was one of his few early theatrical films.
I actually did not realize that Reanimator was in the theater.
Yeah, and
the first one was.
The first one was, and that movie was popular in Japan. I know a while back on Twitter, something was making the rounds of the manga adaptation of Reanimator that was published in Halloween magazine in Japan, which is of course a magazine targeted at middle school girls, who also happen to be the audience for most horror in Japan.
Oh my God, this Brian Yuzna's like stuff he has worked on or produced is quite a thing.
Yeah,
like the fact that he was like, because again, we talked about this in the panel, but that rather terrible first Guyver movie, that was 1991, so he was at least aware of like the English language manga things that were coming out.
Well, here's the connection with after Reanimator, and it was popular in Japan for his next two movies, which was the sequel, Bride of Reanimator, which was direct to video, and also Society. Which was it's not a good movie, but it has some like really crazy, disgusting body horror effects at the end, where you have this secret society of rich people who are actually this
like weird alien
right? creature. So those were actually financed by a Japanese company in a 2-picture deal, and also Brian Yuzna seems to have a specialty in making movies that are popular in other countries, not outside of U.S. and Canada. And that was the case with Society, which was, again, had better distribution in Europe and Japan than it did here. But when he was making those two movies, that financier hooked him up with a special effects artist who is a Japanese-American who goes by Screaming Mad George. Yep. He collaborated with him on the visual effects for that movie, and Screaming Mad George was the guy who directed that first Guyver film, and Yuzna was producer for that. And it was after that film that Yuzna was looking into adapt other manga titles.
Like what other manga things are there, and that's how you get to Crying Freeman.
Crying Freeman, yeah. But unfortunately, I think that if Crying Freeman had found an American distributor, had actually been more of a hit here in the U.S. and Canada. There was apparently an intention to do more Crying Freeman movies. I can't imagine how those later arcs would have worked as live action films.
Jeez.
But it would have been something, all right.
Yeah.
But yeah, obviously, like you watch this movie and there are certain decisions that you can see like this would not fly in the Hollywood. Like there's scenes where innocent bystanders are hit by bullets. There's scenes where. Just the way the acting is, like some people would say it's cheesy or it's like, got that Canadian, stink to it. But like, that's a little hard pill to swallow. The stylized action, like I said, to do Hong Kong style action in 1990. It's not fully Hong Kong style, but to do something that's even close to it.
That's aware of it. Like back in '95, like
back
that
in
was,
94, 95. That's
they're
a
definitely
little too out there.
They're trying to emulate that style of editing. In fact, I think one of the editors worked in a lot of Hong Kong action films. And apparently Christoph Gans, he did the action choreography in this, and he seemed to be quite familiar with that style of shooting an action film, and it shows in the end too.
Yeah, it's definitely not when it comes time to do fights. Okay, we're gonna do shots of just one person doing punches and kicks, and then cut away to somebody getting hit, and then that typical 1980s American action style.
Yeah, you can see what's going on. You can see what their spatial relationship is with each other, which is important to me. It's the difference between, like, I don't know, the Daredevil TV series and the Iron Fist TV series. So, or a very specific reference there. No, I thought the fights were I thought the last fight was kind of ridiculous. Like, there was a shot in that, and I'm trying to remember, I believe it was Mark Dacascos kicked someone in the face, but the camera was in the wrong position, and so you can see that he missed his face. Like, it's a very standard, like, you kick like next to their head and then they'd react. But the camera's like behind the head, and somehow this got like in the wrong position. But I just noticed, but that was, a small thing. Like, I'm sure they were on like a time crunch at that point.
I'm sure it was time crunch. I'm sure like Mark and Christoph probably put that whole thing together kind of last minute. It's not like there was a comic equivalent scene. Like, that whole fight bit at the end wasn't in the original comic. And so they're like, we need to have this thing end on an action note.
Yeah.
Okay, let's put this thing together. And Mark's like, okay, well, I can do all these moves. And it's very clear, like, there's no stunt double really for, the Crying Freeman doing these flips and, stabs and stuff like that.
Dacascos did his own stunts, I understand.
And you could tell from even today, like, I would say the most high profile thing he's done in recent memory was like, John Wick 3, he's the villain that he fights at the end of that movie.
Iron Chef America as well.
Well, yeah, that's the way, but he doesn't have to fight people.
He doesn't have to fight in that.
That's probably the way people know who he is. It's certainly Iron Chef America.
Well, not the thing that
it would be great if he did actually have kung fu battles with the loser of the Iron Chef America.
If they actually have to fight through him to get the ingredients, that would be...
Yeah, like if the secret ingredient was corn, you'd have to actually, like, beat him down and defeat him and get the... No, it was not that formula.
Amazing. It would have been wonderful.
Just in case anyone thought that the chairman in Iron Chef was a real person, I'm sorry to shatter your fantasy there.
But they don't live in a castle and invite the world chefs there once a week to be filmed? I'm disappointed.
Oh, apparently, Julie Condra was at that time, Dacascos' wife. She was the one who convinced him to do that show.
Oh, she convinced him to do Iron Chef. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, he was great in. I mean, there's not much I can think of that Mark Dacascos does that I don't like. Like, Mark Dacascos,
even in bad movies, he's generally good in the movie.
He's so charismatic. I think that being around him makes you want to try harder, and that's why his bits stand out in,
like I said,
otherwise bad movies.
He was
probably the best part of the Saint Seiya movie. He had probably the best scene in that movie, and so. But yeah, no, I love Mark Dacascos. I mean, and this was like a year after like his big breakout, which was it Only the Strong or the one that introduced like, was that the one that introduced like
Only
Capoeira?
the Strong was Capoeira. That's 1993.
Yeah.
And certainly that's like still a super cheesy movie, but it's like it's a kids movie basically. But yeah, that's like the way that people saw, here's Capoeira, everybody. That and Tekken 3.
Right. Exactly. But no, I guess if you want to see this movie, you have to go to the high seas for it, like I did. You have to
pirate it or import it. Those are your options, unfortunately. We're very lucky to have streaming access to this film for even a short period of time. And
there's a lovely Blu-ray. I guess that's Spanish Blu-ray or something?
I think Germany and France. Maybe there was a Spanish one. I wouldn't be surprised if it got released in multiple countries in Europe.
Spain. The one I'm looking at is a really nice Spain Blu-ray.
Okay. I hope this gets a 4K Blu-ray at some point. I think this would look fantastic.
The version I watched, completely legitimately, was a 4K version, so it's something out there.
Maybe there is a 4K version out there. Well, if you can find that 4K version, I would advise checking it out. If there is a 4K Blu-ray out there somewhere, I don't know if there is, but if there is, that would be region free. So you could import that and play that on your very expensive 4K Blu-ray player or PS5.
Yeah, it looks like it's a German release.
Yeah.
The 4K, like you said, it's region free. It also includes a Blu-ray, but that is, I believe it probably would still be region A.
Probably region.
Blu-ray was I thought was like Japan, America, Europe was like one region or something.
No,
certain parts of Europe were region B. We share a region with Japan, though.
Yeah. So if you get that set, if that's still out there, you can watch the 4K on a domestic US or Canada player, but the regular 1080p Blu-ray will not work. You have to get a region-free player, and you can find them. They're out there. You can get a 4K player that has region-free Blu-ray as well, but you gotta pay a little more for that.
You get to see the lovely fauna of Hokkaido, which is very clearly the lovely fauna of Vancouver, of British Columbia.
It'll be more obvious than ever in 4K.
Yes, it's like Vancouver looks absolutely beautiful, and sometimes it's just very, very obvious. Not as bad as, say, Rumble in the Bronx, where he's fighting like in the Bronx, and then they have like shots of like the beautiful mountains of New York, like in the background. But no, this is definitely they did a good job.
All right, well, that is pretty much everything I have to say about this movie. Did you either of you have anything else you wanted to add about Crying Freeman live action?
We didn't really talk necessarily about the plot of the film, which is fine. I don't think it's necessary to really go into the specifics of, this is this, and then this happens. It's not really that important. I was just interested to see, like, from a specifically Canadian fan perspective, how this affected people who saw it and where. And so that's kind of why we kind of came on here, and which is it's cool because it's good to learn something about the film as far as its geography and shooting locations and have you.
It's important. Like it has important connections to Canada, but unfortunately it's not a well-known movie in Canada, and that's why I wanted to do this episode, was to sort of add it to that narrative and create more awareness of it.
It's set in Vancouver and openly Vancouver. That's rare.
It's really
very
cool.
Rare.
And now that we've talked about this, I realize I'm probably going to have to do an episode on that Netflix Death Note movie at some point too.
I mean, that's a Canadian production as well, but I don't think it was trying to say, hey, this is Canada. It was supposed to be the United States.
Very true.
That's a much rougher. God, I had to watch that for our panel.
Terrible film.
I did not want to put Daryl through that. Poor, sweet, gentle Daryl would not have survived it.
Yeah, I did an episode on G Savior, of course, which was filmed largely at my old university.
That's certainly a Canadian triumph.
I pointed this out in that episode. What's interesting about G Savior is that despite the fact that they outsourced the whole production to Vancouver, they didn't actually appear to use any tax credits on it, which almost defeats the entire purpose of saving money.
I'm pretty sure that's perfectly on brand for the rationale of the G Savior project.
Yeah.
That they would make that sort of like really rudimentary mistake. The fact that there are people out there to this day who it's like, we need 4K G Savior, guys. It's canon,
I don't know what to gain from that, but I might want to see some of those awful CG effects. So,
the CG was supposed to be the selling point of that whole movie. When you look at the credits, the special effects company they used, front and center, first thing in the end credits.
Oh my God. Well,
all right. Well,
time has shown. Yeah. So anyway,
I think that wraps us up. Daryl, Gerald, thank you so much for coming on. Can you let people know where our listeners can find you online, or any conventions you might be appearing at in the near future, or anything else you guys are up to?
Well, sure. Just to get everyone the plug in, we're the Anime World Order podcast over at animeworldorder.com, and we generally try to release an episode once a month, though as you can tell, we oftentimes miss that. and we generally talk about things that aren't necessarily the most brand new thing, because we watch the whole show first, and so that invariably means that the thing that we're watching is oftentimes like maybe a year or a couple of decades in the past. I also contribute to Otaku USA Magazine, which you can get in print or in digital, and their website for that is otakuusamagazine.com. And for the moment, I'm still on social media at Twitter at Daryl Surratt. Somebody hook me up with a Blue Sky invite, please, because the site's getting worse and worse.
I've got nothing for you, I'm afraid.
And yeah, so lately I've been sort of hiding in a Discord hole. We've got a private Discord for our Patreon supporters, and we're going to be doing some virtual sort of convention-ish style events. We're going to do extended edition of a panel we just did, which is sort of the reason why we were kind of on here, where we did, the Western takes of anime to live-action film. And so we had a lot of Crying Freeman in there that we just didn't show because it was, not suitable for the hour, but we're just going to show whatever we want on Discord and hopefully not get thrown off the platform. It's not 18 plus, it's, TVMA. And so we'll do that. We also have an event where we're going to go over the new upcoming anime season, which by the time you hear this episode, it may have already happened. But hey, the good thing about anime is every 3-4 months, there's a whole new season of stuff to watch. And so if you missed the first one, you can certainly catch us the next time. Gerald, how about you?
I'm pretty much in all those same places. I'm on Twitter, I'm on Mastodon, I'm on Blue Sky. Can we move off of Twitter, please? Please. I don't care where we go. Just let's get off of Twitter. I write for Otaku USA. Should have an issue I contributed to coming out soon. Anime World Order, of course. The Discord. And I think that's where you'll find me.
Yeah, I think we're all going to be at Otakon too.
I'm actually not sure about my status for any conventions this year. Now that everyone is lifting their mask and vaccine requirements and everything is more crowded than ever, I'm very paranoid about that stuff. I guess most everyone going are like, yeah, they already had COVID anyway, but I have not. And so I don't know if I'll be at those, but I still would like to do some panel type stuff. So I'll try and maybe do those, like I said, virtually either through the Discord. I've also got a Twitch, twitch.tv/SURETD, where we may do those as well. But the problem with Twitch is that you can't have the video on demand if you do a panel type thing where you play video clips. So, we'll have to just go to the social media platforms and see, like, okay, one would be the date and time for any of those sort of live performances.
Yeah, Otakon and Anime Weekend Atlanta are normally what we go to. We're just not sure this year. It's tentative, maybe. Oh yeah, we do want to try to check out Anime North. Speaking of Canada, we've been wanting to go there for a couple of years.
It's a great place to do panels.
Well, some very good people we know go there who are very good panelists.
Anyway, thanks for tuning in to Zannen Canada. You can reach me. I'm still on Twitter at jbetteridge. If you have a Blue Sky invite, I would love it if you reached out and let me know. You can also email zonnencanada@gmail.com. The theme song is by Ultraclystron, and that can be found on his album Packet Flood. That's at ultraclystron.com. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, your podcast app of choice. If you can leave a review on Apple or any of those places, that'd be great too. Anyway, see you again.